Welcome to the K-Arts meets Ars Electronica guest lecture series about human touch. My name is Laura Welzenbach and I'm the head of Ars Electronica Export. I have the great honor to moderate and host this lecture series today. And I hope you're comfy for the next hour because we will have some super exciting input for you. Ars Electronica, a platform, a research lab, a festival dedicated to the discussion around art, technology, and society, collaborates with the Korean National University of Arts for 3 years now. In 2022, we have a very special program prepared for you. It's a guest lecture series in total with 5 lectures, and we are curated or co-curated 3 of them. 3 experts are invited, and I'm happy to have one of them here today. But the 3 experts are Helen Starr, activist, curator, and producer, artist and researcher Spela Petric, and Robin McNicholas, co-founder and director of Marshmallow Laser Feast. After each presentation, Professor Cho, director of the K-Arts Festival at the Ars Electronica Festival, and Vice President of K-Arts University, will be in conversation with each expert. They have the chance for a little bit to dive really deep into the connection of human touch and their practice. So first I want to welcome Professor Cho. Professor Cho, how are you today?
Great, thank you. It is very nice to see you, and also we're so excited to have you today. And now the MLF is very famous, getting reputation in Korean media art world. So I'm so excited and happy to have you today. So I let you start the presentation. I'm so looking forward to singing your work.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just excited and honored to be part of this conversation, and I feel very proud to represent a team at Marshmallow Laser Feast that I will call MLF from now on for the sake of bandwidth. There's 25 of us. We're based all over the world, but predominantly in the UK, and we have a studio in the east of London in Hackney Wick. I'm going to present and take you through some of our practices and expose a little bit about why we do what we do and what it is in terms of our creative collective that gets us up in the morning and inspires us. And effectively, that is driven by technology. And we have developed sensibilities that have realized that whether it's lasers or lights or robotics, using games engines, physical sculptures, there's a new wave of collaborative artworks that are non-individualistic, hugely collective, and that can get leverage from a couple of things. Firstly, the advancements of technology has led to us being able to do things in real time. And this is huge. And, this means that we can allow for spontaneity, allow for the creative process to flow. But it also allows for the collaborative aspect of our practice to really thrive. And so you've just seen a video of some of the works that we have done over the years, but essentially they've all incorporated the 3 different departments within MLF that are interlinked: the creative, the production, all the wonderful producers that we depend on to operate, to tour our work, to get the work into the world in the first place. And our technical team that over the years have developed tool sets and experience that is not only mixed reality focused, but versatile in its approach to be able to develop a tool for one thing, but then apply it to a very different project following that. So that's roughly how it is organised within the collective. And at the core of it is this belief that diversity breeds resilience. Now, with this at the heart of MLF, it allows us to celebrate the new media that is out there. You know, if we want to do a robotic sculpture for one project and a virtual reality project for the next, then the experience of making actually not only enriches our team internally, but it also provides us with a broader understanding of this ever-shifting landscape. And the immersive sector, of course, is still crystallizing. From my perspective, we're still just beginning. You know, we are just at the start of something quite wonderful that effectively has a physical manifestation, what we call LBEs, or location-based experiences, and virtual manifestations as well, persistent story worlds, or what some would call the metaverse or Web 3.0. So a hugely exciting time. Now, the ingredients of our work, well, we get a real kick out of developing work for the live space and developing interactive works that are dormant until our visitors enter and bring it to life through interaction. Often our works utilize multi-sensory aspects, such as the texture of a floor, scent, wind machines, and other tactile approaches to effectively immerse people and allow for the suspension of disbelief, allow people to just fully engage in the story worlds that we're creating. And with those story worlds that we're creating, the immersive storytelling is effectively the rituals, the new forms of crafting works sequentially or for non-linear experiential settings that effectively provide people with familiarity, which I think is a core aspect to storytelling. You don't want to alienate, you want to be inclusive, and cherry picking from theatre, from gaming, from film, from the web, you know, and what we love is the fact that this is fresh snow. This immersive storytelling can cherry pick all the great aspects of those established tropes and remix them and reapply them to the experiential sector. So I'm going to take you through where we operate, how we operate, and why. So to start with where, well, I think that one of the things that I love the most about working with our team is that it is relatively unfettered. You know, we do lots of outdoor work. This was a light sculpture, a kinetic light sculpture that we presented in London, where we collaborated with an extraordinary musician called Erland Cooper. The project was called Nest. And you could see this from across London, and you could enter it, and audiences engaged with it in very different ways. But we've also explored rural settings as well as urban settings. In the case of our project, In the Eyes of the Animal, it was first commissioned for a forest in the north of England called Grisdale Forest by an extraordinary festival called Abandoned Normal Devices, and I really recommend checking those guys out. They're very much in the spirit of the wonderful Ars Electronica, celebrating creativity with these new technologies. And you can see here a little snippet of a work that we've presented recently in Coventry, Observations on Being. And this was a reaction to a cemetery. And we had the absolute honor to work in a cemetery that had lots of history. It was sculpted by the Second World War bombings, but there was also an arboretum in there too. And so building and reflecting on these historic aspects, we created a work that reconnected people to the natural world. And I mentioned rituals and storytelling earlier. Lots of our work employs very human, non-tech approaches, such as the image on the right, which was a blindfold procession. And in this case, we allowed visitors to take in spatial sound that we embedded into the cemetery, and effectively filed people into a very primitive but extremely effective early technology, a pinhole camera, a camera obscura, as well as further down the procession, utilizing the chapel and to present a very highly technical work using scans of the human body. And this installation was called The Tides Within, as part of Observations on Being. And I think there's something quite interesting about the juxtaposition of the high tech in an area that is historically quite ancient, you know. But our work, you can see from this slide, finds its home in all kinds of different areas: cultural squares and galleries, museums, forests, and we love it for that reason. And so we also exhibit online. This is more of a recent development. We've always been passionate about the web, but I'm pleased to say that we fell in love with this extraordinary beast of a project that was entitled Dream, an R&D project initially, where there was a demonstrator that existed over 8 days. There were 10 shows. And again, I'm happy to share this slide. It reminds me of a wonderful adventure and a hugely collaborative effort between multiple creative entities and technical entities and research facilities. It was a collaboration between the Royal Shakespeare Company, the Philharmonia Orchestra, Manchester International Festival, Epic Games, the list goes on, as well as Marshmallow Laser Feast. And I had the privilege to direct the project Dream. I'll show you a quick trailer of that now. So built in Unreal Engine, this was a live mocap production. For every movement the performers made, their avatars created music that was neatly harmonious with the score. And in real time, the audience at home could interact with the story world and thus dictate the movement of the characters in the space. So every show was different. And working with live mocap allowed us to really bring in the creativity of the acting company as well. And for me, I just learned so much from collaborating with the Royal Shakespeare Company, in particular, the head of literary, Pippa Hill, who just enriched my life so much with her knowledge of storytelling from a very traditional non-tech perspective. And I think that symbiotic relationship that we developed over this work, I'm hoping enriched both camps. So you can see a small snippet here of how the experience played out. Sometimes the camera was on rails. Sometimes there was a handheld camera, but the acting company just had 7 meters squared to work with. And 7 meters squared, what we did in Unreal Engine was create a 7 by 7 kilometer forest. And this was, in fact, another character to play with. And the prospect of the future of storytelling, allowing the audience at home to engage in this story world in a different way, really excited me. And I think we just scratched the surface with this demonstrator project. What I learned was, wow, now we've built this 7-kilometer forest. Wouldn't it be amazing to invite audiences to embody the characters that we've created, to almost have an open world game, but utilizing some of the theatrical storytelling techniques. So for me, hugely exciting. And you can see, I'll just turn the audio down. You can see the some of the choreographic approaches here. The video image on the background is flipped, so you can see that the actor on the right is actually performing and puppeteering the avatar on the left on the screen on the right hand side. Peas Blossom, this was the character. Now the fireflies around the character Puck, well, they were actually created by the audience at home. So in some way, the audience provided our character with a costume, a kinetic costume. And actually the role of the audience was lighting department as well. And I just got so much out of this. And you can see the acting company here changing the set, making sure that, you know, the next configuration of staging flats were carefully placed so that we could play with the height of the motion capture volume. And so for one moment, one of the staging flats would be a branch of a tree, the next moment a rock, the moment after that, the roots under the forest floor. And the requirement of the acting company to utilize the space and create a dynamic environment for a live performance was actually something to behold. I personally struggled a great deal to think, where are we now in the woods? And, you know, are they standing on the right staging flats? And props to the extraordinary capabilities of the actors, who not only were able to remember their lines, but also remember their maintain spatial awareness in a virtual world. You can see lots of the learnings from Dream on a website called findingsinthefuture.live. We created it as a resource to share our learnings and just effectively distribute knowledge from what was a very privileged experience, you know, and a rare experience too. We had a research budget, and we also had these extraordinary specialists from all different fields. So check that out if you have the time. Now, in terms of where we present, we also have recently launched a series of works on the 4th floor of the Museum of the Future in Dubai. So again, a very different area to present the work. And in this respect, you can see that there's a common thread throughout lots of our practice, which is a focus on works of nature, drawing attention to the natural world, communicating the wonderment and awe that the natural world and the stories embedded in it provide. And in the Museum of the Future, this is expressed through projection, interactive projection. You can see in this still, this was a scan of the Colombian Amazon. And what we reveal in this particular area of the museum are the inner workings and the mycelia networks and the distribution of nutrients under the forest floor, and utilizing technology, collaborating with scientists to just inform our practice, but then allow us to express our learnings in ways that allow us to show the inner workings of critical systems that our lives depend on. And I would say that this is a huge passion within our team, and you'll see projects like In the Eyes of the Animal, projects like this. There's a commonality in some of the equipment and tool sets that we use as well, in the case of using photogrammetry and LiDAR scanners, contemporary image making techniques, but reappropriated. You know, in the case of a LiDAR, traditionally an architectural tool, we're repurposing it for our needs. And then with the sterile data that comes back to us, we then enrich it further by bringing it to life through fluid dynamics. And yes, we're very proud of the work in the museum. And as practitioners, it brings new challenges because it's a permanent installation. So on the one hand, dealing with live performance that exists for just 8 days, and on the other hand, permanent fixtures that also have a collaborative element. In this case, we worked with an extraordinary design team called Superflux. You can see that there's a physicality to this dynamic lighting system, and I'm so proud of this particular installation, but also in terms of the spirit of the processional experience, being mindful of things like audiences get screen fatigue and bringing physicality and lighting back into the conversation. And here you can see another part of the museum that is presenting a dynamic ecosystem that is unique for each visitor, and the visitors who visit can interact with this in virtual environment and create different simulations and observe the outcomes. So, for example, if there is an excess of carbon dioxide in the air, how does this virtual ecosystem react to such influences? And it's not always good, you know, and this is, I think, a critical factor in terms of communicating the importance of treating the natural world with respect and care. So another aspect of our approach is, if you build a persistent story world, a story world that exists in the virtual and the physical space, it can be readapted, syndicated. And so in the case of In the Eyes of the Animal, this is a useful example, because In the Eyes of the Animal still tours. We're so proud of it, touring the globe. But it tours as a virtual reality experience, as well as on the upper right, you can see Ron Arrad's curtain call is in fact a cylindrical screen. So you can reappropriate virtual reality for different screen surfaces, such as full domes, or cylindrical screens, such as the Ron Arrad's curtain, or in the lower right at the Bradford Science and Media Museum, LED screens. And so we're really mindful about appropriating our work to suit venues and to serve the curator's intentions in the best possible way. Of course, these can coexist. You can have projection and LED and VR all at the same time. It just depends on what the curators and our relationship with them get into the essence of what their intentions are. But it's important to share the pitfalls as well. You know, when developing these works, technology is constantly evolving, and we're very mindful of that, of how do we initially create a LiDAR scan and make sure it's preserved. So when new graphics cards come out, for instance, we can revisit and resyndicate the work and up-res it. Archiving work presents enormous challenges. You know, how do we archive the motion capture data appropriately for the Dream project, and then allow people in 20 years to revisit it and engage with that when all the software and all the motion capture techniques have moved on? And so we learn a lot about creating efficiencies in each project as well. It's essential that we're mindful that reinventing the wheel each time is just so laborious and exhausting. And so if we can ring fence certain practices, this is something that internally we're trying to improve on each from project to project. And budgets are often gargantuan, they're often very large, and so fundraising becomes an enormous challenge. You know, technology and virtual reality headsets, for example, are not only expensive, but throughput means that you can't get as many people through as a traditional movie theatre or a music venue. These are improving across the board, and more, you know, there's a increase in uptake of headsets, and there's also faster and more higher production values and easier ways to stream to headsets. So we see the trajectory of virtual reality in particular as one that we're extremely passionate about, because its end destination is going to be hugely compelling. And in terms of the last point on these pitfalls, there is high risk in this work that is an unestablished sector. I think part of why we love what we do is we like to mitigate those risks and take challenges on and problem solve. And I think that the technical team and the production team in particular see these challenges and as huge responsibilities, but extremely they serve the mindsets of our team quite well. We are, however, mindful that the risks, we want to make sure that audiences are always safe and always felt included in the process. So accessibility is a huge consideration. So how do we do what we do? Well, I've already mentioned the LiDAR scans. In this case, there's always something at MLF going on in terms of R&D. This project that we have just completed with the Eden project in the south of England involved creating an AR layer, allowing visitors to see the inner workings of real-world ecosystems that are growing in the biomes in the Eden project in Cornwall. So audiences were able to hold iPads and see mycelial networks and see the process of phloem and xylem in a African nut oil tree. And we take these learnings and apply them to different jobs, different projects, and they don't have to be AR at all. And the project that we've just completed is a clear example of this, a VR project called Evolver that I'll get onto in a little while. But you can see here just some of the ways that we are augmenting the living world. So moving on, as well as R&D for 5G, we're researching different physical interfaces too. Thinking about tactility, thinking about new possibilities to tell stories through the fingertips. And I think, you know, I mentioned we're passionate about the multi-sensory. Well, we're also passionate about collaborating with designers, material experts who can, again, just really brighten up our lives by contributing their expertise to the collective goal of immersing visitors. And so in this case, the project Tree Hugger had a physical interface that gave its cues to the original giant sequoias that we were scanning in terms of the design form. The the redwoods are soft to touch, and as was the physical interface. So in virtual reality, we simulated that feeling. But there's also a very playful area of experimentation. We ask the question, why is everything that we interact with made of glass or made of steel? iPads, tablets, trackpads. It's cold to the touch, and it's always rigid. And so with this particular project, an ongoing line of R&D, we've been exploring tactility in deformable object tracking, bringing virtual props into the virtual reality story world. But as you can see with this playful palm tree, well, you can do various things with this. When you manipulate the palm tree in the virtual world, you know, all of a sudden you can map audio to it. You can have a palm tree theremin, for example, or in this case, one thing that with the rubber ring that struck me was we are playing with the familiarity of everyday objects. Throw somebody an Oculus controller, and they might well be able to use it if they've used an Oculus controller, but throw somebody a rubber ring and they can put it over their head and they're suddenly in outer space. We've trained with that familiar physical interface on the beach when we were 3 years old, you know. And so I think that dialing into the familiarity of physical props that bend and squish and make sounds like our experience of the real world aids the suspension of disbelief. It allows us to lose ourselves in the virtual story world. And I think in the spirit of accessibility, you know, give somebody a pool noodle, you know, you can map that pool noodle so it's the head of a giraffe, and suddenly you're an animator animating a giraffe, and so it democratizes things as well. And so this playful R&D, we hope to dial into a project called Sweet Dreams, which already has had a life outside of our studio. We took it to Sundance in 2019, and people took their shoes off and they walked on a floor that was squidgy. We tracked their feet and learnt, wow, you can do so many wonderful things with that. We in fact incorporated food into that experience as well. On the left-hand side, you can see the lady eating a petal made of rice paper, and inside that petal, we have popping candy. And when the visitor eats the petal, we play the audio recording of popping candy in somebody's mouth to enhance and amplify the multisensory experience. And this is a binaural recording. And what we're learning is, wow, in the spirit of multisensory, this just really permits new levels of engagement, new storytelling techniques. And in fact, in this particular slide, you can see on the left-hand side, that's how people entered the story world. Now, the project Sweet Dreams that we took to Sundance was a trailer. We're now working on the feature-length version of it. So it was a fundraising exercise there. But in the case of the trailer, people, the person on the left put the virtual reality headset on, and the only thing that they could see was a chair. They walked to that chair, and then we wheeled a table where they just walked. And so when they put their hands out, there was a surprise. There was a physical manifestation paired with the drinking cup. And so in the spirit of mixed reality, we're bringing tactility into this. And when you sucked on the straw, the walls of the room closed in and you sucked yourself into a painting. The way that we did this technically was we had an espresso shot of delicious juice with a digital weighing scale that gave a float value. And the way that this trailer concluded was you sucked the sun out of the universe, and it tasted of lemon and Szechuan pepper. And what we're doing now is, you know, we're pairing the volume of your mouth to the volume of the room. We're playing with colossal scales And what's extraordinary is audiences, they roll with it. The plasticity of the mind says, okay, now I'm drinking the sun. I know it's vast, but I've got a feeling I can take all of this in. And as they do, the light diminishes around them, you know, in a kind of cartoon style, that's all folks reduction. And there's, you know, there's various devices and buttons and invigilation considerations when we're making these works. And you can see some of the arcade buttons basically that helps the invigilators observe what the actions of our guests are doing. And when they pluck a petal, you press they've plucked a petal, and it advances a new chapter in the virtual world, in the games engine. So here's a sneaky snapshot of where we are with the feature-length version of Sweet Dreams. You can see that while we've scaled it up, this is a large space, about 50 by 30 meters, and it's still being developed and adapted. But I'm happy to share this. I hope it inspires others. And one half of this room is in fact all dealt with in virtual reality. The other half is dealt out of headset. And so there's lots of architectural challenges with this, you know, pipelines, like how do we do this in such a way where we develop in Rhino, send those Rhino files and CAD drawings to venues to say, will this fit in your space? And at the same time, then be able to previs things. And so what we're doing is doing things like creating audience simulations, you know, thinking about, well, headsets at the moment, we can't get hundreds of people through, but we might well be able to get batches of 18, for example. And you can see here that we're exploring the user flow and employing new ideas, like how about we invite an audience to enter a space together, but then split them up. So 18 become 3 sixes, and those 3 separate narrative threads give 3 very different experiences. And so from a storytelling perspective, when people exit experiences like Sweet Dreams, it's like, wow, did you experience walking through liquid when another visitor might have experienced walking through sand? And this is what I'm just giving examples here and being quite vague because I can't wait to share the full show with people when it goes live. But again, building in a games engine allows us to previs as well, to effectively build the show before it has a physical manifestation. And so in the case of the CAD drawings, you bring the Rhino file into Unreal Engine, and then you're able to spatialize and try and fathom whether areas are large enough. You know, it's a much more fluid way of engaging as opposed to just going through PDFs. And you can play this online, this particular fly through. So it's just adding grease to the wheels of the work that we're doing. Now, this is an example of, behind me, in fact, is a gong created, an artwork created by this particular production of A Colossal Wave. A colossal wave existed in 2 spaces at once. Location 1 was a gallery. Location 2 was outdoor. It was situated outside the Opera House in Montreal initially. The project toured afterwards. But what played out was a curious theatrical scene. VR users under umbrellas, already building curiosity, and a giant tower, a shipping container, mounted vertically, and visitors threw a bowling ball from a great height that caused a colossal wave that raged over the people under umbrellas. And effectively, this particular project was, again, you can see a huge collaboration. I got to work with a kind of similar organization to MLF called DPT, and one of my heroes, James Patterson, who is called PressTube online. So why do we do what we do? Well, for starters, we get reactions that are unexpected. So a lot of why we do what we do is that when we create works that celebrate the world beyond our senses, different choreographic, dynamic audience reactions play out. You know, if there's a group of people who are all friends, they behave in one way. If there's people who are experts in the field or trying to pursue something, in this case, with We Live in an Ocean of Air, there's scent utilized, there's wind machines utilized. It's currently being shown in the Art Science Museum in Singapore, and I just love watching all the different ways audiences react to the work that we create. But also, you know, there are messages embedded in our work as well. In the playful sense, with a colossal wave, for example, at the core of it was a discussion about the Anthropocene and the giant garbage vortex in the Pacific. In the case of We Live in an Ocean of Air, it's a meditation on the out-breath, where the human body begins and where does it end. And so utilizing technology, allowing people to exhale, they see their breath and they see the subsequent absorption of the CO2 into the natural world around them. And I think that we want to just celebrate the awe and wonder that and stories that the natural world has to offer. And as well as the breath sensor, there was also a heart rate monitor as well with We Live in an Ocean of Air. And the guests saw one another represented as a vascular system with a pulse. And you can see the different technologies here that we're utilizing. So headsets on, there's hand trackers on the front. In the case of this, they're wearing wrist trackers, so it gives us confidence of where users' hands are. And it feels a bit like a scuba dive. And that takes us to the last project that we've just presented. I've literally arrived back in the UK from a 2-week presentation of a project called Evolver. And Evolver 2 is the counterpart to We Live in an Ocean of Air. If We Live in an Ocean of Air is a meditation on the out-breath, Evolver looks inwards and follows the journey of oxygen into the human body. And again, you know, I mentioned we work with LiDAR. Well, in this case, we worked with fMRI data as well. And again, you know, bringing fluid dynamics into the interactive fluid dynamics into the human body. We're inviting guests in virtual reality to experience ourselves from extraordinary scales and from very different perspectives. And we're hoping very much that this piece can tour like We Live in an Ocean of Air did. So there's a few slides here, just a few stills, but I just want to show my appreciation for your attention when I've taken you through this this body of work, and to say thank you. If anybody is further interested in our activity, the Twitter handle and Instagram are here. And yeah, I look forward to our discussion now, Chun.
Thank you so much, Robin. What an impressive presentation. With MLF, you definitely clearly challenge physicality and tactility in technology. It's really impressive how you guided us through your work and through your practice. And I love to see how you challenge also our senses and how you bring in new worlds that are just also challenging our perception. I'm super excited to dive into a few questions now. And Professor Joe, would you like to start here?
Yeah, it was a great lecture. Thank you for your contribution for our program. Actually, I participated in the DREAM project as a firefly. You know, they actually
Oh,
was
wonderful.
supposed to be in that performance. So I'm glad to see your more work and your great idea. So basically, MLF experimented with using VR to bridge the digital and physical worlds. What I really like about your practice and R&D system is that it connects virtual experience with the physical one. So I'd love to know, you already explained about that in the lecture, but know how you deal with the physical limitation of virtual experience and how you choose the location. Many LBE artists and company looking for that kind of site-specific work. And when you contact that place, how you choose that one and how you deal with that environments and
Yeah, thanks for that question. I think that often the curatorial teams reach out to us. So it starts with curators, different organizations, different venues, cultural spaces reaching out to us to say, hey, we're thinking about staging a festival, you know, outdoors in a forest. Do you have any existing work? And often, in fact, the question is, we have this wonderful space. Do you have existing work too? We'd like to stage in the eyes of the animal. And often when we see the locations, we're like, well, sure, we'd like to take in the eyes of the animal there, but this has inspired us further, you know, by doing research and informing ourselves of this particular venue, such as the cemetery for observations on being. All of a sudden, new ideas emerge as well. And so there's really a discussion, a dialogue between us and the curatorial teams that establish our approach to exhibiting work.
Your work is based on pretty much like collective efforts. So I want to know how many people in your R&D group and what portion of the role and yeah.
Well, there are 25 of us at MLF, and at any given time, I would say there's probably about 6 of us that are engaging in the R&D, but this sometimes increases. Say, for instance, the milestones of the R&D lead to, as the example I used with the Eden project, this went from 6 to 16 when carrying out the user tests. And I think that is one of the nice things about our organization, that we're able to scale up and distribute that learning when it is appropriate. And I would say that with that proportion, the timeframes of the R&D vary in length. Some, like the deformable object tracking, for example, involved a university and an NGD student for 3 years focusing solely on this. Whereas the Eden Project 5G example was a much shorter time frame, maybe 6 months. But actually, sometimes internally on our Slack, an idea lands and it's like, we need to test this out. And they become spontaneous R&D challenges that can be addressed very quickly. So hopefully that shows you this, that, as I mentioned, diversity breeds resilience. Well, diversity of R&D projects really helps us as well. It's good to be nimble, but the benefits of long-term R&D give us more stability as well.
I want to know also about the process of fundraising process. How do you get the fund from the government or some specific company which they commission for this some reason?
Yes, well, this is an area that is that requires a lot of creativity from our producers. Effectively, the costs sometimes are prohibitive, and we have to be very clever about our approaches. I suppose I say we, the producers, have to be very clever about their approach, and often they are hybridized. Often, there's an R&D pot, there is government funding from people like the Arts Council, but one of the reasons why we're fortunate to be based in the UK, but also commercial funders and private investors as well. So understanding the kind of hybridization of this and realizing that to achieve our goals, we need to really strategize and build relationships and have our finger on the pulse when it comes to new funding available to us, observing things like the amazing mega grant funding that Epic Games provide. It really varies. It's a commitment to a whole scene, basically. The producers live and breathe these, and they're always thinking about clever ways to find efficiencies.
Thank you. And also, I have to ask about the metaverse performance, because these days so many artists and company are still focusing on the metaverse. So what do you imagine that your work in the metaverse and how that work? And you're working for, dealing with some LBE setting and using some gadget device to make people feel the some physical experience, but it tends to many performance and contents can be toward to the metaverse in near future. So how you predict in that kind of situation? So do you prepare something to some work in the metaverse? I'm wondering.
I don't think you will find many more pro metaverse people than our team at Marshmallow Laser Feast. The opportunity to have virtual counterparts, because our works are natively digital, so they lend themselves to be metaverse ready, but also actually from an individual perspective, I'm pro metaverse because when I studied film and television, I was introduced to the internet for the first time. I'm showing my age, but it was around the time Bondi Blue IMAX were introduced. But also Flash. I mentioned Press Tube, for example, and the conversation here is about the human touch. Well, Press Tube, as an early practitioner, animator, hand-drawn illustrator, that was the first time that I saw the human touch on a very digital platform, the internet. And I think there's a role for arts and culture to have a presence in the metaverse, to walk with big tech entities and create alternative metaverse offerings, actually. But not only that, having been introduced to things like CD-ROMs, and when the internet was very restricted because broadband did not exist, seeing how technology has evolved and being able to grasp the trajectory of where it is going from a creative standpoint, the new opportunities to make stories, that is what drives me. It's this opportunity to think, well, linear film had a heyday where editing techniques emerged through experimentation and R&D. And can you believe it? But there's now a new opportunity with the metaverse to allow that same kind of creative exploration to play out. And I love that.
Great. Thank you for your answer. Very good. So because of time limit, I don't know I have enough time to ask more, but I give, Laura.
Yes,
Can you?
yes, totally. I would have one last question and then we can wrap up. I was wondering, what do you see as the biggest challenges when thinking about bringing this tactical and this tactility and physicality to the digital? When we think about the lecture series is mainly produced for students, they are at the very early stage of exploring this intersection. What advice would you give them? What kind of hints do you have for them to get started with this very, very interesting intersection?
My advice is commit to your passions and collaborate. Collaboration has enriched my life. I think that sometimes I think about Marshmallow Laser Feast as an ecosystem where we have pollinators, we have fungi, we have effectively a whole ecosystem that is codependent. And I depend on extraordinary producers, and I depend on amazing technical staff, creative coders that blow my mind with what they can produce. And I would say start with a small fire and allow those smaller projects to convey your passions and stick to them, because crikey, you can get distracted. I have a zigzagging history. In fact, our whole organization has a zigzagging history, which has given a diverse understanding of the landscape. So it's not a bad thing, but I would say that some paths we've taken perhaps were distractions, and we were attracted to things for the wrong reasons. So yeah, I think it's mainly about remembering your passions, keeping true to yourself, and collaborating.
All right. What a great closing remark. Collaboration and being open to get your ideas out there. Do not protect them with you. Just get them out there and get exchange and different perspectives. Robin, thank you so much. It was a great honor to have you here for this series. Professor Joe, also to you, thank you so much for your questions. I also wanted to thank Hannah in the background of K-Art's team and her team actually as well, as she's producing this lecture series. And I also wanted to thank my team behind the camera. That's Almin and also Ferenc, who did the pre-production. So yeah, this is always important, right? To give also this team visibility. It's not only the people in front of the camera, it's the ones that are behind it as well. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day and thank you. Bye.
Brilliant. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.